Today we're going to get going on the endocrine system. We're going to be covering learning outcomes 10.1 to 10.5. The first learning outcome, we're going to explain the role of intercellular communication in homeostasis and describe the complementary roles of the endocrine and nervous system. Learning outcome number 2, we're going to contrast the major structural classes of hormones, and we're going to explain the general mechanisms of hormonal action on target organs. Learning outcome number 3, we're going to describe the location, hormones, and functions of the pituitary gland. Learning outcome number 4, we're going to describe the location, hormones, and functions of the thyroid gland. And learning outcome number 5, we're going to describe the location, hormones, and functions of the parathyroid gland. All right, let's get started. Let's talk about intercellular communication. The number 1 goal is to preserve homeostasis. It's mostly done through chemical messages. The endocrine system is slower and releases hormones into the bloodstream that bind to target cells, and they have a longer duration. Now, the nervous system, in contrast, is fast, and it has a specific and short duration. Make sure you remember that. When looking at the nervous system and endocrine system, they both rely on the release of chemicals that bind to specific receptors on target cells. They both share chemical messengers. Epinephrine is 1 and norepinephrine is 2. Hormones released from the adrenal medulla, that would be 3. Norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter when released at the synapses, when we talked about action potentials. That's with the nervous system. Both the nervous system and endocrine system are regulated by negative feedback mechanisms. We covered that in chapter 3. And they both coordinate, regulate activities of either cells, tissues, organs, systems, and what's their main goal but to maintain homeostasis. Those are the ways both the nervous and endocrine system are similar. Now let's actually begin with the endocrine system. Number 1, it includes all endocrine cells and tissues. It also includes cells, and they are glandular and secretory. That means they secrete hormones, in this case, or chemical messengers. The secretions enter the extracellular fluid, the ECF, and the cytokines are local chemical messengers. Finally, the hormones are chemical messengers secreted into the blood and transported to the target cells. Make sure you know that. It's highlighted. Now we're going to begin with the structure of hormones. The first type we're going to discuss are amino acid derivatives. They're all derived from the amino acid tyrosine. They include 4 hormones: epinephrine, norepinephrine, thyroid hormones, and melatonin. The second group are called peptide hormones, and they're the largest group. They include ADH, oxytocin, hypothalamic, pituitary, and pancreatic hormones. The next type are lipid derivatives, and they are mostly derived from cholesterol. Steroid hormones are released by reproductive organs and the adrenal cortex. For example, testosterone and estrogen. Eicosanoids coordinate local cellular functions, for example, prostaglandins. This is a fantastic picture. It'll probably be on the test, and it gives you an overview of all the organs and glands and their hormones that they produce. Let's go through it quickly. The hypothalamus, that has the production of ADH, oxytocin, and regulatory hormones. The pituitary gland, that has the anterior lobe that has ACTH, TSH, GH, PRL, FSH, LH, and MSH. The posterior lobe of the pituitary gland releases ADH and oxytocin. The thyroid gland, which produces thyroxine and calcitonin. The adrenal glands, the adrenal medulla produces epinephrine and norepinephrine, and the adrenal cortex produces cortisol, corticosterone, aldosterone, and androgens. The pancreas, the pancreatic islets, produce insulin and glucagon. The pineal gland produces melatonin. The parathyroid glands produce parathyroid hormone. Organs with secondary endocrine functions are the heart, and it secretes ANP. The thymus produces thymosins. Adipose tissue produces leptin. The digestive tract produces numerous hormones we'll study in the digestive system. The kidney produces EPO, erythropoietin, and calcitriol. The gonads in the male are the testes, and they produce androgens, especially testosterone and inhibin. And the ovaries in the female, and they produce estrogens, progestins, and inhibin. The way a hormone works is it alters the operations of target cells. What that means is it can change the identity, the activity, the locations, or quantities of structural proteins and enzymes. The sensitivity of the target cell to a hormone depends on its specific receptors, and the receptors can be located either on the plasma membrane or inside the cell. This is an image showing you the hormone and receptor complex. There's something called intracellular receptors. Intracellular receptors are receptors inside the cytoplasm or the nucleus, and they do many things, but one of the main things they do is they alter the rate of mRNA transcription for protein synthesis. Next is hormone secretion and distribution. Number one, they rapidly enter the blood and are distributed throughout the body. They are freely circulating hormones and are short-lived and inactivated when, number one, they diffuse to target cells and bind to receptors. Number two, they are absorbed and broken down in the liver and kidney. And number three, they are broken down by enzymes in the plasma or interstitial fluid. The way we control endocrine activity is based on three methods. Hormonal secretion under negative feedback control is based on three types of stimuli. There's humoral stimuli, hormonal stimuli, and neural stimuli. The hypothalamus coordinates the nervous and endocrine system. The hypothalamus acts as an endocrine gland when it's synthesizing ADH and oxytocin. It also secretes releasing and inhibitory regulatory hormones to control the anterior pituitary secretions. And it also contains ANS centers that control the adrenal medulla through the sympathetic innervation. The pituitary gland is called the master gland, or hypophysis. There's an anterior and posterior pituitary, and they have a very different structure. They secrete 9 hormones. All are unique peptides or small proteins, and they use CAMP as a second messenger mechanism. The main thing you need to know is that there are regulatory hormones of the hypothalamus diffuse into the capillaries and travel through the portal veins. The regulatory hormones diffuse into target cells in the anterior lobe, and the anterior lobe secretes hormones into second capillaries. There are 7 hormones of the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. There's TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, LH, luteinizing hormone, PRL, prolactin, GH, growth hormone, and MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone. Let's go into thyroid stimulating hormone. It has a second name called thyrotropin, and it triggers the release of thyroid hormones from the thyroid gland. Now we have adrenocorticotropic hormone. It's also called corticotropin. It stimulates the secretion of the steroid hormones called glucocorticoids from the adrenal cortex. They include CRH from the hypothalamus that triggers ACTH. Also remember that there are gonadotropins, or sex hormones, and they're triggered by gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH, from the hypothalamus. Next, we have follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicle-stimulating hormone promotes the follicle and egg development in females and promotes sperm production in males. Luteinizing hormone induces ovulation and secretion of progestins in females, and it stimulates the production of androgens such as testosterone in males. Prolactin is the hormone that stimulates the mammary gland to produce milk in nursing mothers, and actually mammary gland development itself. Growth hormone is very important. It's also called human growth hormone, or HGH, and it has another name called somatotropin. It stimulates cell growth and replication of all cells, but especially skeletal muscle and chondrocytes. It stimulates the liver to release somatomidins, which trigger the increase in amino acid uptake by cells following a meal. It also has multiple metabolic effects and influences. Next, we have MSH, or melanocyte stimulating hormone. This increases activity of the melanocytes in the skin. It appears to be non-functional in adults. However, it's very active in fetal development, very young children, pregnancy, and certain diseases. Now let's go into the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. There are two hormones there. They include ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. In diabetes insipidus, that's the cause of failure of the kidneys to respond to ADH. ADH has another name called vasopressin. Its primary target cell is the kidney, and it's to decrease water loss, and it triggers vasoconstriction and an increase in blood pressure. Oxytocin is very important. In women, it stimulates the contraction of the uterine muscles during labor and delivery. It also stimulates the contraction of cells surrounding the milk secretory cells in the mammary glands. It also appears to play an unclear role in sexual arousal. Make sure you know this image. This goes into the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, and you can see the 7 hormones of the anterior pituitary and the 2 of the posterior pituitary. It also shows you the targets areas that these hormones stimulate. Let's go over the thyroid follicles. TSH causes the release of thyroid hormones. There are 2 main ones, thyroxine, T4, and then triiodothyronine, and that has 3 iodine and is more potent. These 2 hormones are very effective. They activate nearly every cell in the body. They increase the rate of ATP production in the mitochondria. They also activate the genes coding for enzyme synthesis. And these enzymes increase the rate of metabolism, and last but not least, they have a calorigenic effect. This is when the cell uses more energy, and it's measured in calories, and heat is produced. Let's talk about calcitonin. Calcitonin is also a product of the thyroid gland. It's very important for us. It's stimulated by increases in plasma calcium. It inhibits osteoclasts in bone. It stimulates calcium excretion by the kidneys, and it's essential for normal bone growth in children and the last trimester of pregnancy. Sometimes there are calcium imbalances, and we can get hypercalcemia, and that causes a few things: a decreased sodium permeability of excitable membranes, and it can result in less responsive muscles and nerves. And then hypocalcemia causes an increased sodium permeability and highly excitable spasmodic muscles and nerves. The parathyroid glands prevent hypocalcemia. Make sure you know that. The parathyroid glands help prevent hypocalcemia. The parathyroid glands produce a hormone called parathyroid hormone. It's stimulated by a decrease in plasma calcium. It activates osteoclasts in the bone, it reduces calcium excretion by the kidneys, and it stimulates the kidneys to secrete calcitriol, which increases calcium absorption in the digestive tract. This shows you the unique relationship between the thyroid glands and the parathyroid glands, and they help maintain calcium balance in the body. Make sure you know this table, and again, this tells you the unique connection between the thyroid and parathyroid glands, and thyroxine, calcitonin, and parathyroid hormone.